let it snow, let it snow, let it snow is what Tom Mart says. Listen, dude, I'm about done with winter, so you can take that snow and stick it where the snow don't shine or whatever. I don't know. That's not a very nice thing to say to one of our favorite guests on this show, Tom Martz. But anyway, let's just get started on the old recording here, and we shall proceed with the Liberty Talk.
The Constitution isn't just a document. It's a blueprint for freedom. We're breaking down politics at every level, exposing government overreach, and going where the mainstream media surely won't. Join us in defending individual rights against the bureaucratic tide. You're listening to the Missouri Liberty Report.
All right, folks, and we are back for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. So, new intro, same old podcast, but it was time to make a little bit of a change. I like the outcome of that of the new product. Again, that comes from a site called Fiverr, Fiverr.com, and they have. And I just literally, I went on and searched for podcast intro, found a guy by the name of Keith. $25, folks. $25, brand new intro, and it sounds really good. And I actually like it better than the last one. And thanks to Brandon, because most of that is Brandon's script. So bravo on that as well. And folks, we got several different things to cover tonight, and I think what we'll do is we'll start like we generally do. I think this is like something we're going to do. We're going to start with Missouri, and then we're going to end with the, different things from different states. We got a story out of Texas. We got one out of Montana. We've got some stuff from a short video featuring RFK Jr., and some other things. So we got a lot of information to go through tonight, but we're going to start, and it's just some audio. I recorded it to the board today, so hopefully it turns out well. It generally does off the board, but then I say that and something will go stupid on me. But so as many of you probably, if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you've heard a gentleman by the name of Bryant Wolfin. Now, he's been on this show either 3 or 4 times. I don't remember. Brandon and I had him on once, but he was on with me at least 2 or 3 other times. Now, Bryant ran unopposed in the election in November, so he's around the St. Genevieve area, and he has been serving, and he has been doing some talking on the House floor, and he looks like he's promising. Excuse me. I don't know how. I don't know how I'm going to do this, because I never sent the photo that Tom sent Catherine and I, and let me see if I can find it. Because this, if you're in Bryant's position as far as being on the House floor, voting on a bill, and then you are the lone no vote, that has got to be okay. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm going to have to send it to myself in an email or something. I'll get it to myself, which sounds really weird when I say it like that, but I will send myself something to myself. Sounds like that thing from Austin Powers. It's like, allow myself to introduce myself, and he's all I know it's going to hit my email here very soon. Let me pull it up for all the live stream viewers here, because this again has to be the most lonely feeling in the world, even if you're doing the right thing. And it's just crazy. As soon as my email box opens up here and I see the picture, put the picture on the screen. Wow, that is really okay. I gotta actually find the JPEG so I can open it up and everyone else can see it on the screen. Let me blow it up here. It's going to distort it. But if you look right down here, one no vote, Bryant Wolfin. Now this was on HB 737 and 466. This was the Protecting Children Act. Bryant was the lone no vote. Now I actually, after Tom sent that photo to Catherine and I texted Bryant and I said, "Hey man, what was it like being the only no vote?" And he said, "Dude, it was a really weird feeling." He's like, "I know I did the right thing, but it just felt so odd to just, your name's highlighted in red. You had a few yellows, which could have meant they chose not to
Just
vote,
voted present,
or they were absent. But to be the only person in the room, and all these other conservatives in the room voting for this horrible bill, and Mr. Wolfin took a stand. And that is, again, folks, we talk on this show so many times about being constitutional. We wanting our state reps to stand up, vote constitutionally, vote the right way. And it's easy for us to say it because we're sitting here behind a mic. But can you imagine being in a room of 160 some odd people and being the odd man out? Even though you're doing the right thing, the rest of your colleagues are choosing to vote unconstitutionally because of the name of the bill, and they don't want to be that person that voted no on that bill. So he said he was going to go talk to Mike Moon later that day and talk to him because Mike Moon feels the same way. He feels like the lone man out there, just kind of on your own island and just staring off at all the people on the other land mass and going, what are all those crazy people doing over there? So, yeah, but big pat on the back for Bryant Wolfin. So I'll do you one better. Let's do this. I want to put up his phone number straight to his contact info at the house. So let me.
I just wanted to chime in real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
And say that being the lone no vote on a bill titled Protection of Children. I'm sure it's unconstitutional. I haven't read it. I didn't see the title of the bill when you sent that to me earlier, so I didn't look into it. But if it's unconstitutional, and I believe him that it is. Being the lone no vote on that is tough because you can already hear the narrative. He voted no on Protect Our Children Act. Like they don't know. The average Joe voter isn't going to know that the bill itself was unconstitutional. They're just going to hear the name and hear that he voted no. And so really kudos to him for standing up. You can already see the attack coming at him from the other way. So yeah, he definitely deserves a big pat on the back. Protect Bryant Wolfin at all costs.
Yeah, I absolutely. So 100%, dude. I mean, just he has to be protected. I'm sorry. Tom alerted me that you were echoing, and that's because I had two audio sources going at one time. So yeah, that's my stupidity again. John hits it out of the park again for being retarded. I'm going to read off his phone number, folks, and I ask if any of you are out there willing to do so, to call. This is the phone number I'm getting ready to read off to you is his direct number to his office at the Capitol. 573-751-5912. You know what I'd like? I would like to see as many people as we possibly can leave a voicemail at his office in Jefferson City and saying, hey, Bryant, thank you for voting the right way, which is constitutionally, and being the lone man out, being the odd man out, but being the odd man out the right way. and let's see how many phone calls we can get to him as far as congratulatory, being congratulatory or just showing your support, even if he's not in your district. Shows, and the same thing could go for Mike Moon. But Bryant's brand new. It's just, it's his freshman term. And, I would like to get as many phone calls into Bryant Wolfin's office and telling him thank you for being constitutional and upholding your oath to the Constitution. And actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the problem with the bill is it got other stuff lumped in with it. There were some things in there that were a little sketchy, but I think it had other bills piled into it, and Bryant said, nope, can't do it. So now that we've gotten through that, I've muddled that up good for all of you. Let me play some audio of Bryant's speech on the floor speaking on another bill. And I'll be real honest, I don't know what bill it was, but Bryant lays out perfectly why he would vote the way he does and his reasonings for doing so. I believe the first one is something to do with COVID restrictions. But Bryant lays out the exact reason, the factual and logical reasoning why we didn't need this bill to begin with. So let me cue this up and we'll play this.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to speak on the bill, excuse me.
Proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first, I want to commend the lady here for doing such a fantastic job of being a champion of liberty. I think she sets the standard, and I'm proud to call her a colleague of mine, and I know she's doing an excellent job here. But with that said, unfortunately, I think where we align 99% of the time, I think here we do disagree. And once again, I kind of find myself here in the middle of everybody because I completely disagree with what this side says, and I'm probably going to disagree with what this side says. And I'll get into why. So ironically, I actually co-sponsored this bill at first because to share the sentiments of my colleagues over here, I hate government control. I think, we've seen a level of tyranny that we've never seen before during COVID. And obviously, the gut-wrench feeling is that we have to do something about it. So, like you guys, I distrust the government. But as I started digging into these bills and was considering the bills that we are going to be hearing today, I realized something, and it just started getting on the philosophical level, that we already have these restrictions on local government, on state government, and on federal government. And that mechanism that we have is our Constitution. So the First Amendment of the United States, as I will remind you, says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion and prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And the Missouri Constitution, Article 1, Section 5, says that all men and women have a natural and indefeasible right to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own consciences, and that no human authority can control or interfere with the rights of the conscience. It also adds, nor shall citizens' right to pray or express his or her religious beliefs shall be infringed. They shall not be infringed. Excuse me, I butchered that. So I just want to remind everybody that our rights are obviously not given to us by our government. They are not given to us by even our Constitution. They are God-given, they are natural, and more importantly, they're inalienable. The Constitution does not create them, as I just alluded to. So that means if a city or a county tries to shut down a place of worship for whatever reason, that they are already acting unconstitutionally and not within the confines of our Constitution. So they can and should be challenged in court, and that's up to the people. So the Constitution is not just a mere suggestion. It is the law, and we do not need to pass excess statutes that remind the government what it is already prohibited to do, or from doing. So, but I do get it. I understand the foundation of this bill, and I support the premise to an extent. But to me, passing laws like this is actually kind of an act against liberty. If we pass redundant laws, I think it sends a message that kind of undermines the Constitution, and it says that our rights only exist if the legislature affirms them, which I think is a dangerous idea, and I oppose, obviously. So our rights exist whether or not the government wants to acknowledge them or not. If we really want to protect Missourians from government overreach, my opinion would be that we should be passing penalties towards these local political subdivisions or the local public servants, whether that's financial penalties, whether that's even jail time to an extent. I mean, they are violating our rights. I think that's pretty extreme. We could also pass a constitutional amendment maybe that states our rights are not subject to local restrictions. And so I think these would be better solutions when it comes to protecting our rights rather than redundant legislation. But at the end of the day, either way, it's not the job of the legislature to fix every injustice. I think that responsibility actually falls on the people. Thomas Jefferson there on the wall in front of us said that the price of freedom or liberty requires eternal vigilance. So the Constitution gives us the tool to resist that tyranny, but tools don't work unless you use them. When government steps out of bounds, whether it's the federal, state, or local level, it is the duty of the people to push back, to challenge unconstitutional laws in court and remove them from office to those who violate our rights. So we cannot legislate our way out of tyranny because laws on a piece of paper don't mean a darn thing. So the people need to stand up. They need to refuse to comply. They need to challenge unconstitutional laws, and they need to ensure elected officials fear the people. Elected servants, as I like to say. So anyways, closing thoughts. The bill, it tries to resolve a problem that I think the constitutionally has already solved, both our U.S. and our state. It sets a precedent that suggests that our rights come from the legislature and not from our creator. So we don't need any more laws to protect our rights. We really need leaders who are actually uphold the Constitution. Every elected official or servant in this state takes an oath to protect and uphold the Constitution. We just need them to follow that. And we also need citizens. It is your responsibility to stand up and fight when your rights are being violated, and I think that's the most important thing. So instead of passing redundant laws, I say we demand that our public servants respect the Constitution that's already in place. And Mr. Speaker, I do oppose this bill, but I absolutely appreciate what the lady's trying to do here. Thank you. But I just want to kind of explain myself one more time to where I'm going to be. Everyone gets up here and probably expects me already to kind of preach the principles of our Constitution. And I will say this bill and the former bill we just heard, in my opinion, are very constitutional. But that's not where my quarrel lies. As I said the other day, I think this undermines the very principles of our Constitution and the reason why these were crafted and drafted for our rights protections. I truly believe that the founders themselves would have been against these kinds of state controls. You can go back, and there's several examples of why they believed in local autonomy. Our very own first constitution of this state gave sovereignty to those very municipalities and local political subdivisions because they believed that the people were sovereign and that every form of government derives its power from the people, not from the state, which includes local autonomy. And if that is the case, to me, that's why I believe that the founders would certainly be on my side on this one. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of explain myself, but I do appreciate what the lady's trying to do. I appreciate what the rep on the former bill was trying to do, and because no one hates tyranny more than I do, and even at the local level. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So some wise words from Bryant Wolfin. Go ahead, Brandon. What are your thoughts here?
It's just impressive from a freshman congressman. And this is not a critique of Bryant at all, but he's not a perfectly polished politician. It would almost be scarier if he was. But he fumbles when he speaks. You can tell his speeches are all written by himself. Like, these are his thoughts and his words coming out, and it feels genuine. And, and his arguments are very laid out, very constitutional, and very, again, polite towards his opposition, but then also really emphatically drives his point home. So again, kudos to Bryant.
Yeah, again, you're 100% correct. I mean, he is not some polished politician. He is, he seems, I don't know, more human than a lot of them do. A lot of them seem like drones, or again, they're polished enough to where they can say all the right keywords and make the hamsters run on the wheel or hit the button. But, as far as doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they're sorely lacking in protecting natural rights. They're really good at, throwing away principle to make sure the party or to toe the party line instead of adhering to what their principles should be. Because there's some people that probably do go in there with, maybe thinking they're going to stand up against the tide, and then, it doesn't take much for them to crack. They're like, oh, I don't like being the only guy, so I'm just going to go ahead and follow along with the crowd. And, as a representative or a senator or whatever your elected position is, if you have a bunch of people in a political body, who are trying to protect your natural rights, yeah, I'd say go with the crowd on that one. But if you know absolutely they're not, it is not supposed to be a popularity contest in that building. Sure, you want to build coalitions if you're trying to get actually good things done, good constitutional things done. But why are you, again, why are they, it just seems like they don't want people mad at them. It's like, if you're doing, in today's political climate, if you are doing what you're actually supposed to be doing, and that is, again, the key thing is protecting people's natural rights of all sorts: speech, self-defense, protections against, civil asset forfeiture, any of these things. You should be the cool guy who bucks the system and doesn't try to be, like all the cool kids, because all the cool kids are hanging out in Jefferson City, and in D.C. they're all hanging out and getting fat paychecks or getting their campaign funds a lot of money piled into their campaign funds because they're cool kids, but cool kids to the lobbyists. So it's I like this rebellious side to people when it comes to understanding that, hey, there are already rules against government doing X, Y, and Z, and it's in the Constitution. We don't need to add to God knows how big the revised Missouri statute books are, but we don't need to add pages to that. It's already set in place. You people. And here's something else that's nice. Instead of pointing out the leadership or okay, let me rephrase this. Instead of pointing out just the leadership or just the reps, he addresses everyone, the reps and the people. You need to understand, how limited government's power is supposed to be. The people need to understand, and if they don't, or if they don't like it, then they just don't comply with said bad law. That's another key takeaway. There are so many people in the podcast world and a lot of reps who will come home and they will complain about leadership. Now, the leadership in Jefferson City is due a lot of complaints. But guess what? If a whole lot of reps would grow a spine and buck the system and tell the leadership, we're not doing that, we want this, and hold it hostage, I'd rather see that. But the fingers generally get pointed at leadership. It's like, no, on the House side, there's 160 some odd people that are to blame, or maybe not all of them. But let's say in this case, it was 162 people or however many, and one was right. And 99.9% of the others were wrong. But I'm so glad that he addressed not just the legislative body, but the citizens as well. That everybody has a responsibility to protect their rights. And again, it's nice to hear somebody saying, hey, I understand that my rights don't come from the legislature. They don't come from government. So a lot of good things. And I I don't mind it not sounding all slick and polished like Brandon was saying, because it was the truth. And that's the most important part here. He was speaking the truth. So what if it didn't sound like some flowery speechwriter wrote it all down and he was just reading it verbatim? I don't care how flowery it sounds. I care about the truth. And we should care about the truth at all times, especially when it's coming from the legislative body. So it's just nice to know that we have a Bryant Wolfin in the House and we have a Mike Moon in the Senate. And now, as Brandon said, we got to protect this guy. They're probably, if he keeps this up, his first 2-year term, guaranteed they're going to try to primary him out. So we've got to help that guy get reelected in 2 years, in 2026. Now, I was supposed to go to the Capitol today. Me and Gary Ridenauer were supposed to go, and I was going to go to Bryant's office about 8:30 in the morning and interview him and just have a face-to-face with him about his experience. I am going up next week, Tuesday, and because, well, it won't be dumping snow then. If this snowfall would have started in the afternoon, Gary and I would have went. But when it said it was going to start at 2 a.m., it's like, yeah, I don't think we're going to beat that. I'm not going to Jeff City, sleeping in a parking lot for so many hours, and then getting up and walking up that hill in this brutal cold to get into that building. So we're going to try again next week, Tuesday. Bryant said he would absolutely set aside some time for me to do an interview, and then I will play it on that upcoming show that evening so we can hear it straight from the horse's mouth. So, all right, anything else to add to that, Brandon, before we move on to the other topics?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Just good on Bryant. Glad, like you said, glad we got another true voice for the Constitution and for liberty in the House since Mike Moon's in the Senate.
Absolutely. All right, Brandon. So what do you want to do next? Which crazy? We've got a couple of crazy articles here, and we've got. Let's see what else we got. Oh, we got some other video files here as well. But anything particular you want to start out with?
Well, I want to just give a quick shout out to Missouri House Rep Mike Koslow. He introduced Defend the Guard to the House floor, and it got read for a second time. So me and a couple of the other libertarians are following this closely, and we're going to try to figure out which committee this goes into. And then, like you said, power to the people. We're going to start a hard pressure campaign on the fence sitters on this. Anyone on the committee who's on the fence for this Defend the Guard bill, we're going to hammer them pretty hard with phone calls. So could really use some help from anyone in the live chat or anybody watching. When that time comes, we'll give you more information as that develops. But just wanted to give a shout out to Mike Koslow for putting Defend the Guard to the floor and having it read.
And I will keep that in mind. And that's a bill that we can cover for our legislative review in here in a couple of weeks when we have Tom and Catherine on. That's one of the bills because between this session and last session, I know I don't remember who we had on, but one of the people in the live chat asked somebody. Oh, it was a guy running. He was actually running for the Senate down around the Cape Girardeau area, and I can't think of his name now. But he was going to run, and somebody's like, "Hey, would you put forth a bill like this?" And he's like, "Absolutely," because he's former Marine. But yeah, since it's there, I definitely want to cover that on the show. And you said that's 1128.
No, it's 1228.
1228. Okay.
HB 1228.
Okay, so
yeah,
that's
real close.
That's one of those bills that we'll want to cover on Tuesday. Voodoo Queen says she's going to call. Voodoo Queen, if you don't know, Brandon, Voodoo Queen is a champion of emails, phone calls, and even faxes when it comes to working bills. She is the queen of contacting reps and senators in Jefferson City. So Voodoo Queen will definitely call on that bill, and she will definitely call committee members. So, yeah, folks, if you want to get involved, it is a simple way. you can if there's a hearing on the bill, you can go and actually testify, or you can type it out. There's a form you can fill out for certain. I think you can do it on the House side. I'm not. There's one side you can and one side you can't. Sometimes you can actually type out a witness form and it will be read into the minutes of that hearing. Or you could just call. Once Brandon finds out what committee it's going through, and we find out the committee members, you can help by calling those committee members and trying to entice them to vote it through committee and get it back on the House floor. But there's several things that you guys can do here if you'd like. This is one of those great bills that this is a popular bill among states. There's several states working this legislation right now. It would be great if Missouri would jump on board. And here's my fear. And this is not to speak ill of the gentleman who authored the bill, because I don't think it matters who's in the White House. This bill is important. But I've seen legislative bodies in states that don't seem to fight so hard when a Republican is in the White House or Republicans have control of Congress. Once the Democrats get control, then we're going to act tough. So I'm hoping that between Brandon and the people that he works with and some of you folks, that it doesn't matter who's in the White House, that we push this bill forward, because this is very meaningful legislation. So that'll be cool. So, all right. With that being said, Brandon, what do you want to get to first, brother?
Let's do the Montana.
Okay.
I titled this one Montana Mary J. Madness.
This is stupid, people. But go ahead.
I'll pull up the slides.
Okay.
1 second, and then I'll read them off. Whoa. Okay, this is from a website called Marijuana Moment, author Kyle Yeager. Title of the article is Montana GOP Senator's Bill Would Require People to Register and Pay a $200 annual fee to use recreational marijuana. Marijuana reform advocates are sounding the alarm after Montana GOP Senator filed a bill that would require adult use cannabis consumers to register and pay a $200 annual fee to participate in the legal program that voters approved in 2020. Senator Greg Hertz introduced this legislation, SB 255, last week. It would create a registration system similar to what's in place for medical cannabis in many states, except that it would be for adults in a recreational market with a significantly higher annual fee. Adults would need to pay the $200 fee to obtain a cannabis card from the state cannabis control division. Participants would need to pay that fee each year for renewal.
Hold on, real quick. There's something here that just I just want to point out real quick before we continue on, and it's on the first slide. Require adult use cannabis consumers to register and pay a $200 annual fee to participate in the legal program that voters approved in 2020. The legal one, which means it's already legal. Why do you have to pay a fee? All right, we can continue on from there. Sorry. I had to point that out. Stupid.
Yeah, it's crazy because, I mean, it's sad living in Missouri. I was thinking about this bill earlier today, because if you're in a conservative state, they're way more like if you have recreational legal in a conservative state like Missouri, they're going to put we're next in line for this. If you think this won't happen here, you're wrong. They're already trying to regulate and put all these different things on marijuana in Missouri as is.
And
so if
hemp.
you think hemp, yeah, all of it, anything related, they're gonna add on more and more taxes, more and more regulations every chance they get. And so when you see a state like Montana doing this to their recreational marijuana, you just know a state like Missouri is coming next. But I will continue. Quote, no other adult use state forces cannabis consumers to enroll in a state registry, and the People's Initiative explicitly prohibits this surveillance and government overreach. I guess I didn't figure out who quoted that, but somebody who's against this bill. Recriminalizing cannabis for anyone who doesn't pay $200 per year to register with the state is an affront to Montana voters who made their voices clear when they passed initiative I-190. The text of the bill states that, quote, a marijuana card holder shall keep the individual's marijuana identification card in the individual's immediate possession at all times. The marijuana identification card and a valid photo identification must be displayed on demand of a law enforcement officer, judge of the peace, or city or municipal judge. MPP is encouraging Montanans to reach out to their representatives to oppose the proposal, which the organization says subjects law-abiding cannabis consumers to surveillance and government overreach. This puts Montanans at risk under federal law. Cannabis remains federally illegal, and gun owners who are consumers of cannabis can face up to 10 years in prison. That's the part that really gets me right there at the end, as a gun owner, is that they could, if you're in possession of marijuana with your gun, a federal agent could take you to prison or take you to jail or whatever. And I'm sure it would be a long legal battle or whatever, but it's just something that you're always worried, because with the state, when they have the power to do something, almost always they eventually do it.
That was another thought that came to mind when I saw this, and I was talking about, well, if you don't pay your $200 fee and you get busted, blah blah blah. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, how's this going to tie in with the federal side of it? It's like, it's just like in Missouri, if you had a medical marijuana card, you couldn't go to a gun store and buy a gun. If you answered yes, you had a medical card on your FFL, application, it would be kicked. You couldn't get it. You couldn't buy the gun for having a plant that doesn't cause aggression issues. Okay, so let's say you are just taking antidepressants or something. You can just simply, it says if you've ever had, been diagnosed with certain mental disorders or whatever, mental problems, that you're not supposed to have one either. But, if you take psychotropic drugs, they can have an adverse effect on you. And I'm going to speak from experience on this. Now, I didn't take said pill because I was having depression or anxiety issues. I was younger and dumber back then, and I was a smoker. And a coworker of mine said, well, he went to try to quit smoking once, and the doctor gave him Wellbutrin, and it chilled him out so much that the withdrawal symptoms weren't that bad. So I was like, oh, okay. So I went to the doctor, and I told my doctor the same thing, and he's like, yeah, I got a sample bottle right here. Just take these so you don't have to go get the prescription, blah, blah, blah. 3 or 4 days in on that medication, I chucked the bottle in the trash because my daughter was maybe 2 years old, a little older than 2. And I came home from work one day, and I would snap at the drop of a hat. Like, I would get angry. I was at my work, I threw stuff down an aisleway, and I was not pleasant to be around. The final straw is I came home from work, and my daughter asked me a very benign question, like, Dad, what are we going to have for supper? And I almost reared back and hit her. And I was like, okay, I was not this way, because I hadn't quit cold turkey. I was just going longer and longer in between times I would have a cigarette. So I hadn't cut cold turkey. It was not trying to cut cold turkey, out of cigarettes that made me that angry. It was clearly the Wellbutrin. So I went in and I threw the bottle in the trash. I told my wife, I was like, I can't do it. I am going to absolutely, I almost hurt my daughter because she asked me what was for supper. And so I was just like, you know what? I'd rather smoke. And then I went to chewing tobacco and quit smoking, and then come to find out years down the road, that's actually harder to quit than cigarettes. So go me. I mean, the worst, I should have just tried to quit tobacco and nicotine altogether. But so what I'm trying to get at, moral of the story is, I've talked to several people that they'll go in, they're having an issue, the doctor prescribes them something, and it takes a while to get the balance right, because it might hit their mood all out of whack. And I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just like you have that, and then you have weed, and the worst thing about weed you might get is some paranoia, and you don't want to leave your house because you're high as heck, and you're freaking out, and you think the cops are going to bust you at any minute. But you don't get violent. You don't. I've never seen someone smoke. I've smoked a lot of weed in my day. I never looked to go kick somebody's butt when I was higher than a kite. So I'll just leave it at that. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because the direct one-to-one, I would say, is like you're never go out to fill out a gun application, and they're like, "Do you ever plan on drinking ever again?
Right.
Like, do you ever plan on buying liquor again in your life?" Like, you don't have to put that on the form. No one cares. It's a family tradition, or in my circle, that you bring whiskey to deer camp. You have to, or you're not allowed back. And so, and no one there. That's just the culture around it, I guess, for my family. But my point being there is that it's so much more restricted. But I guarantee if you look up the marijuana to gun crime rates versus the alcohol to gun crime rates, the alcohol to gun crime rates is going to win. But you never hear any uproar about anybody with drinking and guns. It's not a good idea. My guns are always locked up. And when I'm drinking, I'm never handling my guns while I've been drinking. But they don't ask that on the form. You don't have to carry around I'm not drinking while I have my gun card on you all the time. So yeah, the one-to-one there with alcohol is what really makes you wonder. And it's just clear that right now this Montana law is just a money grab. They're just adding a $200 annual fee to anyone who wants to partake in recreation because they can. I mean, it's for the kids. Like you always say, they'll make the argument, oh, it's for the kids. You got to do it for the kids. But no, it's not for the kids. It's so they can get there and an extra piece for the state.
Yeah. I can't find the thing right now. There was a movie on, I don't remember if it's on Netflix or what. It was a documentary that I saw. It was called The Great White Hope, and it was talking about the drug war. And they had listed on there how much alcohol and tobacco companies had donated to anti-drug campaigning. So like DARE and all that stuff, like alcohol and tobacco were they were putting millions of dollars into these anti-drug campaigns and commercials and everything, donating to all these groups to fight literally against marijuana. So, yeah, I think alcohol companies have a vested interest in keeping their competition out. So they're donating they're donating to the drug war and all that stuff as far as commercials and education and all that. It's awful funny, though, because a lot of reps and senators like their alcoholic beverages, so they're not going to pass a law that's going to interfere with their drink of choice on the weekends or even sitting in their office. If you're Dean Plocker, apparently you have an alcohol cabinet in your office at the Capitol. They're not going to pass any legislation that would regulate the alcohol industry anymore. But here in Missouri, I mean, they're going after hemp. Any hemp product, any intoxicating hemp product, it's full speed ahead. But yeah, this Montana thing, I feel like Montana, like the legislature in Montana and Missouri, even though Missouri, the legislature's got a little better as far as it goes to marijuana, they still have a long way to go because, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, if you talked about legalizing marijuana, the legislature and a whole bunch of people like, we can't have a bunch of weed snorters running around tearing up stuff. We can't do that. They're all going to be on the devil's lettuce and burning the town down. But it did get better. But I feel like sometimes these states, I don't know if it's necessary. I'm sure some of it has to do with campaign contributions and lobbying. But sometimes they're so backwards, old-fashioned. You know what I mean, Brandon?
But here's what I'll say about the Missouri legislature on marijuana is that they did not pass recreational. It was forced upon them by the will of the people through the through the
Yeah, it was
whatever it's called.
Well, it was a ballot initiative.
Constitutional ballot initiative. That's the word I was looking for.
But it was outside money too. I mean,
yeah, and I don't even like the ballot initiative. I think it still gave the state too much power and allowed you to be taxed too heavily. Absolutely. So I'm not I'm not even a huge fan, but the Missouri legislature was not good on it. So the only thing they've done since they've legalized it is regulate hemp and allow different municipalities to tax you at to stack taxes, which fortunately in Missouri, the law was struck down. So I think it was, I can't remember if it was just an appellate court or if it was the state Supreme Court, but they ruled that a county and a city cannot impose the same tax. So that's a small win, because most states and localities most counties were charging a 3% tax, and then cities are charging a 3% tax on top of that. So that is a small win for the people of Missouri. And back to our point earlier about it being done by the people. This was done by owners of marijuana shops who were opposed to this tax. And so they challenged it in court, which is exactly the right way to go about, fighting government, at least on that front for sure. But yeah, the Missouri legislature has never been great on marijuana. They've always just been tax additive, and I could definitely see our legislature pulling a move like this, no doubt.
Yeah, if they're going to, again, there's this push to get rid of the income tax in Missouri, and I know that it's been brought up before that that's not constitutional. I know Tom's in here right now, or he was in the chat. I heard mention that getting rid of the income tax actually wouldn't be constitutional because it only applies to, whatever percentage of people in the state. But I'm like, okay, but it applies to everybody that pays into the Missouri income tax. So I don't see a problem with getting rid of the Missouri state income tax. And if you got rid of the corporate income tax and it applies to everybody that pays the income tax and you got rid of it, I don't know how that would be unconstitutional. Now, there are a lot of people that would rather see the personal property tax go away. I'm with you. But to me, if you can eliminate the tax burden and eliminating the corporate or the individual Missouri state income tax, I don't see that as being unconstitutional, getting rid of it, because it's not like you're saying, well, only the people who pay the top 10% of the individual income tax don't have to pay it anymore. The other 90% do. That would be unconstitutional. But just eliminating the income tax, if they wanted to, I don't think is unconstitutional. Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I am. But I was just like, that doesn't seem, in my head, I'm like, that doesn't seem logical.
I have this is just a hypothetical. So, Constitution aside, which idea would you prefer? Again, not basing on the Constitution, just basing on the practical effects of what would happen. So, whenever the Republicans introduced the legislation for reducing the income tax, I think we talked about it on the show, that it's starting with the top tier. It's starting with the top tier tax earners and working its way down once Missouri develops a slush fund big enough to, when it feels safe enough to start lowering the income tax rate because it can supplement itself with this giant slush fund that it's created. Do you think eliminating the income tax or eliminating sales tax on groceries would be more beneficial to the people?
Man.
And I'm just saying that because when I read an article about the Republicans introducing this legislation to reduce the income tax, a Democrat had came out and said, I think a better idea would be eliminating sales tax on groceries. You would see a better effect on, it would have a better effect on everyday people a lot faster. And I kind of agreed with that line of thinking. But again, I haven't thought about the constitutionality of eliminating sales tax only on groceries. I'm just saying, Constitution aside, which idea practically sounds better to you?
You know what? And when you're talking about income tax versus, sales tax on groceries, yes, I do believe the sales tax on groceries is maybe a better policy because that would affect it would affect more people than the state income tax. Tom says it would be applied to everyone who pays income taxes equally. People who don't pay any income tax wouldn't have any impact overall. So I'm guessing that's constitutional because, again, if they would just say we're going to eliminate it altogether and not, once we build this up, then we get rid of it. If it just said they're going to get rid of the income tax overall, I'm fine with that because that's ending theft of your income that, to me, the state doesn't have any right to. State, local, federal, whatever, they don't have a right to take taxation as theft. Get rid of it. But yes, if you're talking about impact overall across people of different socioeconomic backgrounds, or if they're retired or they're on a fixed income, or if they work every day, then yes, the sales tax, ending the sales tax on groceries impacts more people because, let's face it, the price of groceries isn't coming down anytime soon. But no. Either way, it's a win. I do get the Democrats' point that for people in, again, retirees, people on Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare, they're definitely going to get a benefit out of that because now when they go to the grocery store, their grocery bill's a little bit lower. But again, I think, to me, if you're going to give me a choice of whatever, I would say get rid of that stupid personal property tax because even people on Medicaid who own a car are paying personal property tax. Retirees. Anybody that owns an automobile, home, side-by-side, farm equipment, all those things, I think that's the best one. But clearly, there's a whole bunch of gutless Republicans who refuse to do it. And again, my question to them is, 29 states in the United States doesn't have personal property tax, but you know what they still have? Unfortunately, they still have government-run schools. They have roads, they have bridges, they have police departments, they have fire departments, EMTs, and these people don't want to do the work to figure out how the other states do it. They just go, oh, and it's been brought up before. The last hearing on a bill to get rid, incrementally lower the rate of the personal property tax until it's negatory, it's gone. There were firemen and police officers in their dress blues at the hearings, talking about how we just absolutely cannot get rid of the personal property tax. And it's like, wait a minute, are you being paid right now are you on the taxpayer dime in Jefferson City from St. Louis or some other, municipality at the Capitol testifying against getting rid of personal property? It's like, that's what you're doing? Because if you're being paid right now to do this, that's out of line. You're being paid by the taxpayers to go to a building to vote against or to rail against a tax on the people who are paying your salaries. That's kind of a slap in the face. But it's so I don't know. It just drives me nuts. But yeah, I don't see a problem with getting rid of the income tax. I don't see it as unconstitutional, and Tom and I can have a more in-depth conversation about that later because it would have no negative impact or positive impact on people who don't pay income taxes. So I don't know. I just don't see an issue with it. I just, at this point, we need some initiative to lower the tax burden on as many people as we can. So maybe we go sales tax on groceries first, and then we start working on income taxes, or we start working on that personal property tax. But we got to do something. Because if, let's say, big what if here, but let's say the feds start cutting back on the amount of money that goes to the states. And we talked about this last week. It's these gutless, a bunch of these gutless Republicans are not going to be like, well, I guess we better cut spending. No. They'll figure out a way to make that money up. And you and I, folks, will pay the price on that one. Believe you and me.
Yeah, like we say all the time, they'll do the classic, like, oh, like you said, oh, you want to get rid of the sales, or you want to get rid of the personal property tax, you must hate police officers. You must hate firefighters because you want to get rid of that personal property tax. That's their play. So that's what we'll hear for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so ridiculous, but we can't, as it stands right now, until the people get super fed up with the legislature up there, there's no getting those people on track to actually do what they need to do to actually try to help people keep as much of their money as they absolutely can.
I think pretty soon you'll have a lot more people go into cash-based businesses and people working. You'll have a lot more people working for cash if the government keeps, if the government doesn't stop causing inflation and not lowering taxes. Like if everything's always getting more expensive because the government continues to print and print more money, and then they also need more money from me to keep funding all of their printing, eventually I'm just going to work for cash and find someone who will pay me in cash to do manual labor. I'm totally fine with that versus giving away a third of my income to the state.
I mean, yeah.
I'd rather find somewhere that's
look
paying
at
cash.
all the, like, around COVID and after COVID, look how many doctors said, I'm not taking insurance anymore. They open up their own office. They open up their own practice. They say, sometimes it was you pay so much a month and you go in there and then you know what your office visit's going to be, just a general, like, oh, you got the flu or something, you go see them. But we're not taking any insurance of any kind. Just, whew. And it was just, you'll pay, there'll be a sliding scale for, different treatment options, if it's sutures or putting a cast on you, whatever. That's it. And no more insurance. And yes, if the government keeps screwing around, then I agree. More people, that's the thing about people. Some people will just cave and not buck the system, but there's a whole lot of people, especially when you're messing with their money. They're gonna figure out a way to make sure Uncle Sam doesn't know how much money they're bringing in. And I'm absolutely fine. And some people will say, well, that's not fair. He's not paying his fair share. Oh, then fine. How about you do the same thing? How about stop being a little you-know-what? I can't say it on the radio. But how about you stop being a you-know-what and join in? Why you got to turn in the guy? Just do what you need to do to screw Uncle Sam out of what he thinks is your fair share, because that little statement, everybody just pays their fair share. Fair share according to who? That's arbitrary. Some jackass is going to make up the amount that they think you should pay, and without knowing your financials and how, what kind of debt you have or whatever, they're just going to say, well, this is, according to our statistics, this should be your fair share. Yeah, because I'm sure those numbers aren't fudged anymore. After seeing the audits of some of these departments and agencies at the federal level, surely you guys wouldn't fudge the numbers and screw us out and waste a bunch of money. Oh, no way. That'll never happen. So, yeah, it's really stupid. But, all right, what do you want to get into?
Well,
go ahead.
Well, just really quick, this isn't any of the topics I sent over, but I had a moment. So, speaking of all of the Doge work and the audits of all the departments, I read today that there was $4 trillion worth of payments that came out of the Treasury Department that were unmarked. So there's no way of tracing where $4 trillion was sent from the Treasury Department. And they just recently initiated a system where now they have to track every transaction that leaves the Treasury. But that's a very recent thing. So, I mean, I talked about this a little bit last week. If you are against auditing the government, like, you can, we can have nuanced conversations about cutting down different departments. They're unconstitutional to begin with, but, well, this one benefits these people, whatever. We're talking about just an audit, just to how are you spending your money for the causes that you say you're doing it for? How so many Democrats are against these audits is beyond me. But it hit me the other day. We may be living through a political renaissance because one of the most powerful people in the country, Elon Musk, tweeted that he wants to do a video audit of Fort Knox to see if all of the gold is really sitting in Fort Knox, and do an audit, like a full audit of the Treasury. And so, I mean, if you would have told me 2 years ago that this was even going to be in the discourse, like that it was even going to be even somewhat popular, that they're going to audit Fort Knox, they're going to audit the Treasury, they're going to, crack down on, wasteful government spending in a very meaningful way. Because even when they announced Doge, even just last year, I was like, really, they're gonna get it? No, they're doing the job. And it just goes to show you that it's the people, it's the will of the people. Because if Elon Musk wasn't so popular with what he's doing, it wouldn't be happening. Like, they'd be able to shut him down in 5 minutes if he didn't have the support of the people behind him. And so we may be actually living through a full change, like a full paradigm shift in the way people view politics nowadays. And I think it's, I don't love Donald Trump. I don't like all the things that his administration's doing, but it is an exciting time to be alive when you see things like Elon Musk and Mike Lee and Thomas Massey saying we're going to audit Fort Knox.
Again, kind of like you said, I would have never dreamt in a million years that we would even be having this conversation. I'm happy about the conversation. What would make me the happiest, and I know Sam Britton put this out in his show notes from his show Sunday night. What would make me happier is they find all this fraudulent spending and they're like, we're just shutting this agency down. Like, you guys blew through, let's come up with an arbitrary number. You guys blew through $350 billion over the last 5 years on nothing. Nothing that did anything but waste money, and there was no positive outcome. We're just shutting you down. I think that's the best outcome. Will that happen? Probably not. But I would like to talk to be like, hey, I mean, you got the Department of Education. That's being bantied about. Shut down the Department of Ed. I have absolutely no problem with that. Unconstitutional agency should not exist. I will buy pom-poms that says defund whatever department. I will wear them around town. I'm not putting on a cheerleader outfit because I'm not that weird. But I will get the foam finger like you buy at the football games. It says defund whatever. Maybe that's something. I need to develop a foam finger like factory, and it just says in the audit, in the Fed, in the ATF, in the the FDA, all these, and we just sell them. People can just wear, like, it'd be great if you get like a bunch of people going to a baseball game, and instead of having like the St. Louis Cardinals foam finger, it'd be like in the ATF foam fingers, and the cameras panning around, and the announcers are like,
because they'd see like 50 people in one section. Like, you get a bunch of people to go buy a Cardinals game tickets for one day with the foam fingers, and they're all doing it. The camera's going to flash to them big. What does that say? Defund the ATF. Yeah. Cut away.
Kill camera two. And so, it would be cool. But yeah, I will cheerlead in ending any. That includes the FBI. That includes the CIA. Any of them. I wholeheartedly would love to just see a slash and burn of federal agencies, and also a slash and burn of many state agencies as well, like DESE and so many others. Nothing would please me more to see. It's not going to happen with this governor and the reps and senators that we have now. That's not and I don't mean to lump the couple that were really high on into that mold there. It's just the majority of them, again, don't have the guts to do it. They just want to run DESE in their own way. And it's like, well, if you're supposed to be for smaller government, You should want to rid that department. Just get rid of it. Take the funding. Figure out a better way to do education. Turn it over to local level or whatever. But good Lord,
we have a better way. You elect school boards. They choose the superintendent of the school. Like you have at almost every single public school in the state of Missouri, you have your ability to go have your piece said. You don't have choice. So like if you don't like what your district's doing, you don't have any choice in the matter, but you have a say at the local level. And if you think having DESE is going to make it easier for you to have a say at your child's school, you're wrong. Your best bet is to, like you said, you get a bunch of people together, you go to the school board meetings and you say, hey, we don't want you teaching our kids this. We want them to learn this, this, and this. And that's how you make the difference. You don't need a DESE. The system is set up to not need DESE to begin with. And so all you'd have to do is basically eliminate school borders where different kids could choose whatever public, government ran school they want. And then eventually you would phase that out where, basically private institutions take over the industry, because the government can never run anything nearly as successfully or efficiently as the private industry in anything.
Well, I was going to say, what's funny when you say, go to the school board meetings and talk? At our local school board, you literally have to fill out a request to even speak at a school board meeting. You can't just show up and speak. You have to ask permission to speak at our local school board meetings. I'm like, that shouldn't even be a thing. Now, again, school board members are not taxpayer funded. They don't make any type of salary, but it doesn't matter. They're over the school district. The parents should be able to show up and speak on a topic. And you have to ask permission from the school board members to be allowed time to speak at a meeting. And it's like, where the hell did this come from?
I kind of understand the argument that you would have to have a child attending the schools to go to a school board meeting. Although if you pay property taxes to fund that school, you should have just as much of a right to have your piece said about the school as anybody else. I mean, again, like I understand the argument behind only allowing parents, but in that sense, if I had a child and I intended to send them to public school, which I don't, but if I had the intention of sending my kid to public school and I had to fill out a form to go speak at school board meetings, I might run for the school board, and my only thing would be, you don't need a form to come to the school board meetings and say your 2-minute piece.
It doesn't even matter. It can be anybody to speak. You can be a parent, non-parent, but you just have to ask permission to speak at an upcoming meeting. And I'm like, no. Again, like you said, our property taxes are paying for this school. If I show up and you bring up something, I should be allowed to speak on it instead of just, this is what we're talking about, blah, 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 and now meeting's over. And I have to, talk to somebody, do something, call somebody, and say, I'd like to speak on this. And they're like, okay. It probably kills them that you show up and even, how dare you even talk to us, you freaking, you pawn, you little peasant, you. But yeah, some school boards aren't like that. Our local school board is like that. I'm like, who set up those rules? I just found that really, really odd that we had to ask permission. Because, even our local city council meeting, you don't have to ask. Now, if you wanted to speak on a particular topic, you might alert them like, hey, I'd like to have 10 minutes to talk about this, something that has to do with, like, tax money or something. But you show up, there's public comments are allowed, but not a school board meeting, not in Owensville. And I just find that very – and here's the thing. When they were fighting a bond issue, they wanted to set it aside, and it was like, oh, well, you can't do this, and you can't do handouts during the meeting. You have to do them outside the building. I believe those rules. All this stupid stuff. I'm like, you just don't want people talking about this. You just hope the bond goes through, but you don't want to have a discussion. You don't want to any civil discourse on this. I just found it all very, very disturbing, and that's my problem. It's like, oh, you want to control. It seems they seemingly want control, of what can be talked about. Like maybe you're going to bring up something that's maybe a little dark or they don't want you talking about. And it's like, oh, we're just going to ignore him like we didn't get that request and we're not going to let him talk. No, I think you should be able to show up. And if they're doing dumb things, then they should win dumb prizes right there in front of a newspaper reporter and any parents or any staff that show up. They should all just sit there and get and take their lumps and then go home and lick their wounds later. And be like, well, if you didn't do dumb things, you wouldn't win dumb prizes in front of all these other people. And then go home and have your spouse like run you a hot bath and put lavender in there or whatever to calm you down, or give you a hemp suppository to calm your ass down. But whatever. It just that stuff drives me nuts. Anyway.
Oh yeah, like you were saying with the funding that they wanted. What is it called? The blanking twice.
School bond.
The school bond. Yeah, when they're talking about limiting discussion on the school bond and making you fill out a request form to speak at their school board meeting, it's almost like they're trying to limit any challenges to their authority. At least outwardly, that's how it appears. And secondly, it makes it harder for you to challenge the things that you like, to question some of the moves that they're making, let alone, specifically, not just like their general overall, power structure, but like individual things they're doing. They can kind of push those through without having too much public discourse with the way they've got it set up. So yeah, it just seems very not the way you would want a transparent, efficient government for the people to work.
I'll give you another example here in town. So we've been in this house like 11, 12 years now. We moved into town because the tax rate went down. And I told my wife, it's like, all right, it's fine. We can move into city limits. I'm fine now with it. We get here, and we're here like 4 months. And we order some Domino's pizza. And on top of the box is a thing about building a new water park. And I told my wife, you got to be freaking kidding me. We just moved into town, and now these idiots want to build a new water park. So as it got closer to the vote in April, people wrote articles they wrote letters to the editor. Now here's the funny thing, because the editor of the paper I believe is also on the park board. He was at that time. So any letter in support was put the front of the paper. The folks that I worked for, the business that I worked for, the wife wrote a letter in opposition. Actually, she didn't write in opposition. The statement of her letter and the thought behind it was, think before you vote. They put it on page 18.
Well, of course they did.
And we're just like, oh, so much for... And there was a Facebook page on the water park. Myself and one other dude were on there posting our opposing views. Because they're like, this is a forum for, open discussion on the proposed water park. So me and a former police officer, no less, we're giving our views on it, like, we don't like this. And so a woman, I'll never forget this, because there was a gal in the comments, and it was pointed at me. She's directed at me. She's like, well, if you're opposed to this, are you going to take your kids to this water park? I said, no, why would I participate in my own theft? Like, why would I do that? And then he posted something below it. But here's the funny part. The day or two before the vote, my comments, and it was Matt, I can't remember his last name, Matt something. Matt and my comments were all wiped off the page, and only the positive comments remained on that Facebook page, like a day or two before the vote.
Oh yeah, so they cracked down on.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. That's just classic. What you would expect.
Yeah. It's just funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it is.
Yeah.
You look at it, you're like, wow.
Plus, if you want a water park in your city, what you should do is find a bunch of guys to invest in a bunch of land and build a water park. You don't need, and I hate that argument that they make too, that like if my printer runs out of ink and I just, instead of going to buy new ink, I go to the library to print something off really quick because I only need like 1 or 2 pages printed. I don't want my taxes going to support the library, but it already does. So like, if you didn't support the water park, but then your taxes were forced to pay for that water park and you took your kids to the park, it wouldn't be a reflection on you caving to the government systems. It's that the government took from you and you're going to go enjoy the fruits of your stolen labor. So like, again, I understand your point too, is that like, no, I'm not going to give even my support for this park by showing up. But at the same time, if they force you to pay for it, anyone narking you for using that, I'd be like, yeah, if you force me to pay for it, I probably will take my kids there once or twice because I'm already paying for it.
And then I have to pay to get into it too, so that's even better. So
yeah, it's not even like a free park. You probably still have to pay $5.50 and then $4.50 for nachos.
Yeah, so it didn't make any difference at the end of the day. I'm like, I have to, and here, okay, so here's the other part of this too. The owners, well, the co-owner of that business, she went to a meeting they were having about it because they said it would cost it was like $30-something a year per person. All right, because the funding was getting added to the personal property tax bill. But then, and it was only to the people in the city limits, right? Because it only had to do with Owensville. So then Shannon calls the courthouse and says, how many personal property tax bills go out to the city of Owensville? And they're like, there's this many. Well, when she got to looking, she's like, $35 or whatever, my butt. It was going to be over $100. So she went to a meeting where they were discussing the water park. Now, she brought receipts because they brought up 2 towns that also got water parks. One was Boonville and one was something else. What they neglected to say about the Boonville one is that the casino paid for it. And then they were talking about this other town that made all this money opening day, but they left out the part that a high school meet had a multiple school swim meet, and every person had to pay admission to get into the water park. That's why they made all that money. So she tried bringing that up. They wanted to gloss over it, and then she went to the guy who headed up the meeting afterwards, and he admitted to her that she was right. But he didn't say it during the meeting. So it was like really freaking shady. And I'm like, okay, this, and I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, you people are just insufferable when it comes to this stuff. And it's like, well, other towns, it was to the point where they were trying to say, like, if a business comes into town and they see we don't have things like a water park, they'll go somewhere else. And like, you name me a business owner that goes into a town and wants to know if there's a water park or not. No, they want to know what the tax rate is. They want to know what real estate prices are. They want to know how much of their profit they're going to have to give to the city. It's nothing to do with the freaking water park. You're out of your minds. Yeah. So they were pushing us stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the biggest crock of you-know-what that I've heard in a long time. And in my town, I would expect this behavior. No offense, but like St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, Columbia, bigger towns like that, I mean, they push this crap all the time. But when it hits your town, you're like, oh my God, they've gotten a hold of the same bad crack rock that the big city people get. And that's all it is, dude. There are people in places here in Owensville that want to be big city. It's like, if you want to be big city, go to the big city. We're a rural town for a reason. We're not big city. We don't want the taxes that they pay. We don't need all the amenities. Why do you want to tax other people to entertain your freaking kids? That's a you problem. That's not a me problem.
So do you have a water park in Owensville?
Oh yeah, it passed. It passed resoundingly.
Yeah, I figured it did.
People just like, I'm like, oh great. You want to raise your personal property taxes.
Oh, congratulations. You decided to invest in a business that you see zero profit in. Congratulations. That you still have to pay to you. Like you, oh man.
That's not even open year round. It opens up like Labor Day or sometime in May, and then right around Labor Day, it's shut off.
Yeah.
So
St. Charles has the same things. I'm sure I pay property tax for Wappelhorst Park, and there's actually like 3 different city parks in St. Charles that have water parks. And so I'm sure I'm paying for all of that too.
Oh yeah, you absolutely are. You're just swimming in bleach water, bro. You're just drowning in bleach water.
Yeah. I pay for like 9 city county libraries.
Okay. Anyway, this is getting totally depressing. Let's move on.
Let's make it even more depressing. I've got a lot to say about Russia, Ukraine, so we could move on there, and then if time allows, we'll get to the Texas thing.
So which one are we looking at?
I want to start with the map of Ukraine 2022 to 2025, because that's where I think it's important to really lay context to the amount, to like where the war is right now, to leading up to these discussions. So it's 4 different maps, and the first one shows before the war, where there was like Russian-backed separatist area, which was on the eastern part. So that was contentious for a long time because the United States has been giving Ukraine weapons for a long time. Like since that was what Joe Biden threatened to fire that. He said, we're going to withhold your aid money, military aid, unless you fire that prosecutor. And then fast forward, they tried to impeach Donald Trump because they said, like, there was a rumor that he threatened to withhold the aid if they didn't investigate Joe Biden in Ukraine. So we've been sending them weapons for a long time. And that was the contested area where a bunch of, after the Maiden Revolution, where it would seem that the United States had a heavy hand in overthrowing the democratically elected president of Ukraine in 2014, that area became a separatist region because they didn't want to be, they're ethnically Russian and didn't want to live under a UN NATO puppet regime. So there was basically an ongoing civil war for 8 years in that particular region. And Russia, I'm sure, did back the separatists in some way. And then, March 2022, Russia invades, and as you can see from the March 22 map, they aggressively advanced towards Kiev. Now, I'd heard that that there were European countries that told Putin, we want to work on a deal, pull your troops back, and we'll talk. So Russia pulls a lot of its troops back in the northern region, and then also, I'm sure once Putin and the Russians found out that these European countries weren't actually serious about making a deal, you can see where in November of 2022, where the line is. Like, basically, it's the eastern part of Ukraine. Russia has taken it. And then fast forward over 2 years, so 2.5 years to February 2025, it's the same. There's a small Russian advance, and then at the very north, the Kursk region, a very, very tiny notch of where Ukraine has broken through Russian lines in the north. So just based on the map from November 2022 to February 2025, we've seen Russia make some gains in the south, and then Ukraine's got its very small piece in the north. Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people have been either wounded or killed in this war. So peace has been, it's hard to even fathom, like, outside of, we don't live in the era of like Vietnam, or like where 2 different sides are like really going at it. Most of the conflicts are in that, the prolonged conflicts of modern warfare are against insurgent groups, and like conflicts between 2 nations don't seem to last as long in the modern era. So a going on 3-year war in Ukraine is almost unfathomable to me. So peace has been long overdue. And since Trump got in office, he made the pledge that he was going to shut down a lot of, he was going to help facilitate the end of this war. And he's actually starting to make good on that promise. And so he, said he was going to sit down, and he had a long talk with Putin on the phone, and basically they're going to try to Putin in the U.S. They're the ones really, because I know that a lot of Ukrainian men and women have died fighting this war, but Ukraine would not be where it's at right now without funding from the United States. And so it's the United States weaponry versus the Russians and their weaponry. So the Russians and the United States are the ones negotiating the deal. It's clear, because without our support, there would be no war to begin with. The Europeans, I really don't believe, have the capacity to upkeep a war without the United States and its spending. And so after Trump had his phone call with Putin, he apparently talked to Zelensky, and Zelensky was not happy. So if you want to cut to the clip that says Zelensky sucks and play that for the people, I think it's a good place to start. Because again, this was just all that happened was Trump and Putin had a phone call where they're like, hey, we want to end this war.
All right, let me see, because as soon as I click on it, it's going to play, so I'll have to.
Thing that President Trump said this week. He did not say yes when he was asked if he sees Ukraine as an equal member in the peace process. He did say later that Ukraine would have a seat at the table. Have you been given any assurances that Ukraine will have an equal seat at the negotiating table?
So I will never accept any decisions between the United States and Russia about Ukraine. Never. And our people, never. And our adults and children and everybody. It can't be so. This is the war in Ukraine against us, and it's our human losses. And we are thankful for all the support, unity between USA, in USA, around Ukraine support, bipartisan unity, bipartisan support. We're thankful for all of this, but there is no any leader in the world who can really make a deal with Putin without us, about us.
So there's that.
Yeah, basically saying that doesn't matter. Like, just because we could fight this war without our weapons. Like, no, you can't. Like, I don't feel bad for Zelensky. I do. Obviously, I feel terrible for the Ukrainian people, because I mean, it's hard to say they don't have, basically all of their freedoms were taken away by their own government from this war. And so we don't really know what the sentiment is around the Ukrainian people to continue fighting this war. We don't know what Zelensky's support is. And so you really feel bad. You feel bad for the Ukrainians because, like, they really don't have power in this negotiation. And so, yeah, Putin and Trump are going to be the ones that make this deal. And one thing I think is interesting, if you want to play the RFK on BlackRock, the whole thing has been a scam. I want that to be, I think this clip was just amazing because it perfectly sums up
this is a war that should never
the modern era.
Let me kick this up here.
Happen. It's a war the Russians tried repeatedly to settle on terms that were very, very beneficial to Ukraine and us. The major thing they wanted was for us to keep NATO out of the Ukraine. The big military contractors want to add new countries to NATO all the time. Why? Because then that country has to conform its military purchases to NATO weapon specifications, which means certain companies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Boeing, and Lockheed, get a trapped market. In March of 2022, we committed $113 billion. Just to give you an example, we could have built a home for almost every homeless person in this country. We then committed another $24 billion since then, 2 months ago, and now President Biden's asking for another $60 billion. But the big expenses are going to come after the war, when we have to rebuild all the things that we destroyed. Mitch McConnell was asked, can we really afford to spend $113 billion to Ukraine? He said, don't worry. It's not really going to Ukraine.
It's going to American defense manufacturers.
So he just admitted it's a money laundering scheme. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock. So Tim Scott, during the Republican debate, said, don't worry, It's not a gift to Ukraine. It's a loan. So raise your hand if you think that that loan's ever getting paid back. Yeah, of course it's not. So why do they call it a loan? Because if they call it a loan, they can impose loan conditions. And what are the loan conditions that we impose on? Number one, an extreme austerity program, so that if you're poor in Ukraine, you're going to be poor forever. Number two, most important, Ukraine has to put all of its government-owned assets up for sale to multinational corporations, including all of its agricultural land, the biggest single asset in Europe. In Ukraine, there's been 1,000 years of war fought over that land. It's the richest farmland in the world. It's the breadbasket of Europe. 500,000 kids almost, Ukrainian kids, have died to keep that land as part of Ukraine. They almost certainly didn't know about this loan condition. They've already sold 30% of it. The buyers were DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto. Who do you think owns all of those companies? Yeah, BlackRock. And then in December, President Biden gave out the contract to rebuild Ukraine. And who do you think got that contract? BlackRock. So they're doing this right in front of us. They don't even care that we know anymore, because they know that they can get away with it. And how do they know that? Because they have a strategy. And that strategy is an old strategy, which is they keep us at war with each other. They keep us hating on each other. They keep the Republicans and Democrats fighting each other, black against white, and all these divisions that they sow.
Turn my mic back up. So there's that from RFK. What are you doing? Come here. Go ahead, man. Any comment?
But it really goes to show that if you are opposed to ending this war at this point, you are willfully ignorant to the facts on the ground, that Ukraine is not gaining ground. They don't have a foot to stand on. Tons of their citizens have been killed. So there's no moral justification. There's no logistical justification. The only justification you can make for continuing this war is that it benefits corrupt, large American companies. And so the fact that Donald Trump is getting hate for ending, like the explosion out of Europe, because I saw that Keir Starmer, he's the Prime Minister of Britain, he said that he would put British troops on the ground to ensure a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. And so then the people in Trump's camp were floating the idea of leaving NATO. And I think that's a fantastic idea. If you're going to have someone provoking the Russians, like we're on the verge of ending a war with the Russians that have cost thousands of lives, billions of dollars. Ending war is only for the better. And so if you've got your allies in Europe provoking this war to continue for money, for whatever, then you're on the wrong corrupt side of history right now. And so I think I don't know. I just hearing a lot of the backlash about this deal and a lot of like the outrage on the left of Trump trying to end this war in Ukraine. And it blows my mind that we're 3 years in. You can see from the map that Ukraine is not making any ground or any gains, and that it's just a waste of time and resources, or a waste of lives and resources.
Yeah, I don't know. You have to be mentally defective or really evil to sit here and think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with continuing this war. And you also have to be mentally deficient or just lying to yourself to think that these big defense contractors don't love, something like this, because it's like, oh man, we're going to make a boatload of money on this because it's guaranteed money to us. It's just another way that these, there's a regulation. They call a loan. It's like a built-in regulation. Okay, we're just gonna siphon this money to defense contractors, and then the main company at the top, who's probably the let's call it majority shareholder in all these companies, Their stock prices rise. They're making billions of dollars. And I don't know at what point do these people that support this stuff, why can't they come to get to the point that they realize that supporting things like this is just supporting human suffering. I mean, that's really it. You let your I believe 100% these people hate, and I'm not saying Putin's a good guy, but they hate Putin because the party that they support, either party that supports this war and the billions of dollars that they've laundered through different companies, they only hate Putin because they've been told to. But their hatred of one person, they will somehow justify, again, the toll that's been exacted on Ukrainian men, Russian men. And I even heard, again, I don't know. I can't confirm this. I've never really looked into it. But I even heard that they were taking mentally handicapped people and putting them on the lines in Ukraine. Now tell me exactly, how can you justify that? Because of your hatred of Vladimir Putin, who, in all honesty, doesn't seem to want to end, or doesn't really want this war. He doesn't want this. He's been provoked, as the Scott Horton book would proclaim. He was provoked. But how do you justify exacting this toll of human life on a population because you hate somebody? And again, it's just like going into Afghanistan and spending 20 years in Afghanistan, spending trillions of dollars, displacing people all over the place, killing a lot of innocent people, losing a lot of American lives. And, Canada, there were British troops that lost their lives. 20 years, nothing to show for it, and some people will hold on to the fact that it was necessary. When, if you read Scott Horton's book, they could have caught Osama bin Laden within the first few months, and they let him escape into Pakistan, and then we got rid of him, but then it continued on and on and on. And these people continue to cheerlead for this bloodshed, and I wish I could say exactly what I was thinking, but you are just, these people that continue to support this, won't back down, are just insufferable, miserable pieces of you-know-what.
So there's actually been more breaking news around this that I've been finding out. So Putin and his team, not Putin, Sergei Lavrov, his second in command, his Secretary of State, basically, met with Marco Rubio in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia today. And one of the pieces of negotiation, one thing that Russia said they want to see in Ukraine as part of a negotiation for ending the war, is for Ukraine to have elections. But Zelensky won't have that. He actually announced earlier this week, as I was looking into it, he announced earlier this week that Ukraine doesn't want an election. It's what he said. Ukraine doesn't want an election. They want me to be president, and they want me to continue to stifle free speech and, imprison my opposition and block freedom of speech and block religion. So that's what we're at. That's what we're dealing with, is we've got Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, saying he will put troops on the ground to defend a deal in Ukraine. And you've got Zelensky saying that he refuses to have an election. So don't tell me that this is a fight for democracy and that this is a fight for that's what you heard a lot from the Democrats early on in this war, is that this was a fight for democracy. It was the Russians versus the West and democracy. Well, there's no democracy in Ukraine anymore. So you can't feed me that. And you also can't tell me that we need to continue this war because we're going to beat down Putin, but then also that if we don't put him in check, he's going to take over the entire world. All of these narratives that they try to push, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't tell us that Ukraine's going to be on the verge of beating Russia. We just need a little bit more time. But if we let them go, they're going to take over the entire world. Both of those can't be true.
I don't understand how. But after watching what took place in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya, and us giving weapons to the Saudis to continually bombard Yemen, I mean, as dumb as this stuff is, it's not hard to believe that they will do this and continually push to keep doing it and come up with every excuse under the sun to do it. Now, I know that these big companies, Monsanto, DuPont, the military-industrial complex, are funding an awful lot of campaigns and giving out an awful lot of checks so that they can continue to go into other countries and take their resources. Now, I believe in Iraq, they made a rule for those farmers, if they wanted to continue to farm, they had to buy Monsanto seeds. They couldn't buy any other seeds. Now you sit there and you think to yourself, how could that even be possible? Because I thought we were over there spreading freedom. But we took away farmers' rights to choose what seed they could buy. How freedom-oriented is that? How can you be spreading freedom to a country, yet putting stipulations on how they operate as far as their business, as far as government, businesses, farming, whatever, infrastructure? You're going to tell them, you're going to sit here and tell us, and you're telling those people, we're here to spread freedom and to displace this awful dictator that we also supported at one time, that you need to forget about that part of it. And then we're going to tell you how to operate. And you're going to operate within these boundaries. Again, if you've never read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, you should. Because this gentleman worked for the World Bank. And he laid out, they go into countries, and they say, hey, we'll give you a loan so you can upgrade your infrastructure. You can work on your electric, and you can do this, and you can do that. If they turned it down, suddenly there's a coup. And they got a new leader who will accept the loan, a loan they will never pay back, a loan they can never pay off because of the interest and everything else. So they will continually be under the thumb of a World Bank, and also they have to let certain companies come in and drill for oil or build the electrical infrastructure and do these things. So there's all these little caveats and strings attached to these loans, and they are hopelessly bogged down. And then the said leader down the road might say, I don't want to pay this loan off anymore. I don't like this. I don't like these things that I agreed to in the end because I didn't think it would be this bad. Guess what? That guy's going to go away too. They'll find somebody else to take his place to continue the loan payments. And they'll probably, I mean, he's probably getting kickbacks, some kind. So most of them are going to be fat and happy, while their people don't really see any true net benefit of what was agreed to in the beginning. It's just like taking money from taxpayers here in this country and sending it to another country, and those people buy weapons and all this stuff, and the people see mere pennies of the millions or billions of dollars that are sent over there. Ron Paul and some others have been speaking out on this. It's the same thing. But again, folks, we have people in government who like to tell us who our enemies are. But if you dig down just a little bit, and you see our foreign policy, and you see what the World Banks do, and you see what NATO does, and you see what the UN does, it's hard to imagine not being mad at a group of folks who come into your country unwanted and start shoving you around, changing your government, changing the rules, and then we're supposed to be shocked that they're angry at us? I just, please, that's, as Thomas Massey would say, that's nanarded. That's super nanarded. And you should just go out for a day of electroshock therapy just to straighten you back out.
So
it's ignorance.
I'm glad you brought up the the different ways that the government tries to, like they'll put someone under like the World Bank or the IMF pressure, and then they'll have a coup in that country. Well, part of the political renaissance that like I am just like sometimes I'm just shocked that we're living through this part of our political discourse, but they're cutting USAID funding, which is huge, because I'm sure you know that USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy, they're the ones in charge of sowing the discord. Like they're the ones with starting the movement that leads to things like the Maidan coup in Ukraine.
Yep.
And so I think the fact that they're defunding the USAID is huge. I think it's a bigger you see the major pushback from the institutions. Like all of the cable news companies are out railing against it, and you have all of the usual players in government talking about how, well, they're cutting necessary aid to all of these different regions. First of all, even if they were sending a bunch of aid to all of these different regions, and that's the true purpose of what they were doing, that's not constitutional. And you shouldn't be taking my tax dollars to send it somewhere else just because you feel like it. And secondly, they're using all of that money. They're giving it to like media companies in foreign countries to put out the narrative that they want. And so the fact that they're cutting down on USAID funding and they're going to cut back on the overreach of the CIA, we might actually see a slight shift in foreign policy. And if nothing else, like I said earlier, the Overton window, like the average thinking of the Americans is going to shift to a more transparent, less, provocative foreign policy. And I'm actually pretty excited for it. And then if we have time, I want to play the last, it's the Trump budget cuts. It kind of goes along with the, like, I just can't believe this is the timeline that we live in now.
Okay, let me pull that one up here.
One of the first meetings I want to have is with President Xi of China, President Putin of Russia, and I want to say, let's cut our military budget in half, and we can do that. And I think we'll be able to do it.
I mean, you know what? If we can, if it's again, folks, and I think I can speak for both of us. Do we automatically believe this is going to happen? No. But how often is that even, like in presidential debates or anything, how often is that brought up? You know, the last person that actually really strongly brought up military budget cuts? Ron Paul, 2012. After that, you haven't really had any serious conversation on cutting anything from the military. If it was cuts to the automatic increases every year, but it wasn't an actual cut to any budget at all. And I'm just happy that somebody, again, is saying it. Do we think it's automatically going to happen? No, because these people are entrenched as entrenched can get. They're dug in like a seed tick. Good luck. I mean, you might have to dip yourself in a chlorine bath to get them loose. But the conversation is important.
Well, the conversation it's unbelievably important. Because not only, that's just, it's an amazing thing for the world and world peace for the three largest militaries to all reduce their budgets in half. That is a sign to the world that we are moving into a new era of acquisition and business mentality foreign policy versus this continual train of aggression and spending and death. And like I said, I'm amazed that this is the timeline that we live in now. Like this is the new America. And like I could go on for 2 full hours on just a show about Israel and Trump's support and funding of Israel in that state. But I'm not going to compare him to what he should be doing all the time. I'll compare him to his predecessors and any president of the last 30 years. And even when Barack Obama was coming off of George Bush, and he was talking about how he was going to do things differently, and he was going to be that voice of change, and we're going to work with our enemies. You're going to make peace with our enemies. This is actually doing it. Like not actually doing it, but like putting America on the path of becoming a nation that doesn't solve every problem it has with a bomb.
Yeah, I hearken back when his first time in office, when he stepped across the line from South Korea to North Korea, and the media was having a fit, and it's like, oh my God, he crossed an imaginary boundary line to talk to a dictator in another country. Like, what is the problem? It blows my mind. Again, I'm not surprised by these people because they've been funded. A lot of them have been funded by our own government. So whoever in the CIA or whatever agency they're going to have the talking points that agency wants them to have. But when you think about it, and you want peace, you have to talk to people you don't like. You have to make that effort. You have to extend an olive branch to people that you generally wouldn't agree with. But if you, instead of, like Brandon said, well, we can talk, or we can shoot bullets and drop bombs on each other, and most people would be like, can we do the talk thing first? I mean, if you're a sane, rational human being who's not evil, and your morals aren't guided by your pocketbook, and how many billions of dollars you can make, and things like that, then you would say, let's talk this out. Let's hash out our differences and try to come to an agreement. Now, if your morals are guided by your pocketbook, your stock portfolio, and making money off the deaths of hundreds of thousands of millions of people, you don't want to do that because there's no money in that for you. But peaceful, rational, normal people would generally want to talk it out before they just duke it out and start killing each other.
And to a point you kind of touched on there a second ago, if you wanted peace, like when this war first broke out, if you were just like a decent moral person, like if Joe Biden would have just been a decent moral person with normal person values, he would have been on the phone every day with Putin, every day going, what can we do? Let's stop this killing. Let's come to an agreement. Because Putin is not suffering. Putin's at his giant mansion. He's at his big, whatever they call it, the Kremlin. He's living his lavish lifestyle still. Joe Biden lived a very lavish lifestyle his whole life and will probably continue. He spent a fourth of his presidency on the beach in Delaware. Like, he's not Zelensky's wife spent millions of dollars in France on a spending spree in the middle of the war, while they were supposed to be traveling around asking people for money for the war, basically, for help, for military and financial aid. And so the people making these decisions, and the ones that have decided to go to war and continue the war, they're not the ones suffering. It's the hundreds of thousands of people put to the slaughter. It's the American people who are fronting the bill for this war, and it's the Russian people who've sacrificed their lives and a lot of their economic, they've spent a lot of their own money fighting this war too. And like we said, the oligarchs aren't feeling that pressure. It's going to be the inflation that hits all of the people at the bottom in our country, in Ukraine, and in Russia. And so anyone with any sort of moral guidelines would have tried to end the war as soon as it started and at every possible point after. And the fact that Joe Biden didn't, he should go down in history as one of the worst presidents ever.
Yeah. Again, the comments from people in government, it's just glorious when we can send Russians home in body bags. And again, folks here in this country, as stupid as things are, I mean, unless you live in gang territory in the inner cities where there's gunshots all the time, we don't have bombs dropping on us. We don't have troops moving through our cities and our states and blocking bridges, and there's not like literal firefights between different, infantries and troops, and there's tanks and stuff. We don't have that. So it's real easy for these people to make these decisions because it's happening over there. And so we feel it monetarily, and we see things on the news, and it's the propaganda, of course. You're not getting much truth, but you see these images of what they want you to see. You feel it in your pocketbook, but your sons and daughters aren't dying. They're not over there fighting. So they're not dying in these places and all these. So you don't feel it. So it's real easy for these non-thinking people to support this. But guarantee you, if you told most of them you're being drafted and we're sending you over there, they'd freak out. Freak out. Like, what's the matter? I thought this was the right thing to do. I thought we couldn't let Putin get Ukraine. So you better grab your gear and your gun and hit the trenches and keep those nasty red bastards at bay. And no, then it'll change. But right now, it's too comfortable to sit and just watch this war, this being vicariously part of this war, and then raising your little pom-poms and cheering for the defeat of Putin because it's too easy. And that's the part that sucks. We got 5 minutes
I'm
left.
going to give the Two Birds Award today to Lindsey Graham.
There we go.
Because back in 2019, he bragged about going into Donald Trump's office and he showed him a map of Syria and all of the different oil fields, and convinced Donald Trump to stay in Syria to protect the oil, which Donald Trump ended up saying out loud, ended up saying at a press conference, we're only in Syria to keep the oil, which is corrupt but brazen, and at least he told the truth about it, but I mean, it's a horrible truth. And then did the same exact thing. Lindsey Graham was bragging. I don't know when this happened. It happened either earlier this week or last week. But apparently Lindsey Graham went to the White House with a map of Ukraine and showed him all of the rare earth minerals that are underneath the ground in eastern Ukraine, and was convincing Trump that that's why we need to continue this fight. I don't know about you, John, but I don't own any money in any rare earth mineral companies. I don't know any rare earth mineral excavators who are going to send all of these precious rare earth minerals over to us. I know for sure the federal government's not going to take it, sell it, and divvy up the money to the taxpayers. And so what are we doing it for? We're doing it for major companies to come in and, reap the ground of its, man, you get where I'm going.
Yeah,
with
they're
this,
going to reap the benefits of policies enacted by people that they paid a lot of money to.
At our expense, again.
Yep, absolutely. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. We thank you all who watch on YouTube, on Rumble, and listen by podcast app or at molibertyradio.us. Again, big thanks to Sam and Trish because, again, they gave me my very first spot ever on any network or radio station. So big props to them. So next week we'll have a lot of new stuff to talk about because it's government. There's always something to talk about. But again, not this coming Tuesday, but the following Tuesday will be our next legislative review show with Tom Martz and Catherine Dreyer. So please make sure that you check them out. But again, also, go ahead, Brandon, real quick.
I didn't. I was just going to say, don't forget, next week we got you're going to have your interview with Bryant Wolfin.
Yes, I'm going to try to have that audio as well. Also, guys, check out ksgf.com and look for Tom Martz's audio, the podcast from that station. He does a show on there every Friday. And then also check out molibertyradio.us on Sunday nights, especially from 6 to 9 p.m. Central Time, off the cuff with Sam and Trish Britton. But again, I bid you all farewell. Enjoy this lovely snowy weather if you live anywhere close around that's getting all this craptastic amount of snow. And be careful out there, guys. And we'll see you next Tuesday, right on the Missouri Liberty Report.